My friends, I'd say we were closer to civil war than ever before. If you watched the live show at noon, you'd understand even in greater detail. But there is a debate raging right now, particularly among those who are anti-establishment, some who supported Trump or this narrative, that Donald Trump's actions in deportations are wrong. Well, I'm here to argue that Donald Trump is in the right, and it's a challenge. It's a challenge. I can dismiss almost everything pertaining to the deportation of these criminal gang members by simply saying wartime president. And, a lot of people are going to say, I don't like the sound of that. I don't care. Literally don't care. Over the past 5 or so years, this country has been in a state of active conflict. I'm not saying kinetic conflict. The lockdowns from COVID originated with Donald Trump 2 weeks to slow the spread. Then we ended up with a wave of lockdowns across the country, mandated medications, mass riots to the likes of which we hadn't seen in decades, 30 plus deaths, firebombing of government buildings, firebombing of the White House and St. John's Church. Donald Trump loses an election, call it whatever you want, but he lost. Joe Biden takes power. The lockdowns extend. It's been active conflict for some time. The Biden administration and its allies in various states sought to put the president in prison. Some people tried to kill him twice. One was a pro-Ukraine zealot. Now we are getting acts of terror across the country. And then comes Donald Trump's deportations. And you say to me, how dare Trump? Okay, there's no argument to be made. Philosophically, morally, we're done. Are you a fool? Are you blind? Or are you being fooled? Trump administration has noon deadline, they say. This is the story. The judge wants to know what happened with these flights that were headed to El Salvador, deporting what Trump claims are gang members and criminals. Now, the important thing to understand before we get into this debate is that Barack Obama was called the deporter in chief. The amount of individuals who are deported from this country without quote unquote due process probably spans millions of people over the past several decades in our generation. I'd imagine millions. Democrats never complained about it before. Hillary Clinton said, deport the criminal aliens, no questions asked. The Supreme Court, I don't know if it was Supreme Court actually, but there's the court precedent on the Alien Enemies Act going back to 1948 is that there is no judicial review should the president declare alien enemies to be removed from this country. Makes sense. The reason why we have an executive branch is quite simple. The founding fathers, quite brilliant, said, let's figure out what form of government this country should be. Perhaps it should be a direct democracy where people elect representatives and those reps are for each area and the council comes together and convenes to represent those areas. So it's not so much a direct democracy, but largely the people vote. No, the problem there is you get a rule of the majority and then you'll have conflict when the minority refuses to abide by the majority. So how do we solve for that? That's a good point. Not to mention that committees can't answer warfare particularly well. Yikes. Well, that's not going to work. What if we had a council of elders, people that we appoint who are learned in matters of law, who could make these decisions in a much smaller group? Instead of states, you'd have appointed individuals by the state governments that would represent certain regions. Okay. Well, once again, you're going to have individuals over a long period of time with a set political view, unchanging, and it's not a bad idea, but still likely not strong enough to deal with things in the immediate. It could be a decent way to run things. I'm not sure. What if we had a king? Yeah, the problem with kings is how do you pass the power down? Just a president. You elect a president. Okay, I got an idea. All three. You get direct representation, you get a council of elders, and an executive. Why? The executive can handle military actions and executive action instantly. That means for the most pressing matters, if someone's attacking our shores, the president say, rally the troops, go. We don't got to wait for committees. We don't got to wait for hearings. When it comes to law enforcement, domestic or foreign, war, whatever, a president can act. The laws of this land will be determined by the people, and a council of elders will help keep it all in check. A Supreme Court, as it were. It's brilliant. So here we are today. The Alien Enemies Act, as codified in law, which they're now entertaining as old law, 18th century law, as pointed out by the viewers yesterday in the morning show, murder extends well beyond the 18th century and is illegal. So we don't say it's an old law barring murder. Alien Enemies Act, when people come to this country and they're criminals or they're aliens, there's no judicial review. Ask Barack Obama how many people he detained in Florida and other states. Where's their due process? They were captured and put in cages and then sent home. Heavens me! No due process. Joe Biden flooded the zone, and they engaged in administrative warfare. They arguably, there was still kinetic warfare from the ground up, with the far left ransacking, rioting, and destroying, which they're doing now. Case in point is the latest iteration of this debate, which I feel warranted a full segment. Michael Schellenberger tweets this: every single Trump advisor, including and especially Stephen Miller, knows perfectly well that what they did is unconstitutional. Wrong. Molly says, given the issues at play, I assume you're referring to the judge, but it's unclear from your wording. Schellenberger responds, we have a constitution and a balance of powers for a reason. Do you really support the Trump administration defying a judge's orders? I wish he did. He's arguing he didn't. The argument they've made is they will abide by all the orders now, and planes that were on the ground did not go anywhere, but planes that already left did not stop. In fact, in this community note, Ludek v. Watkins, 1948, the court held, quote, the Alien Enemy Act precludes judicial review of the removal order. From the opinion, quote, these are matters of political judgment for which judges have neither technical competence nor official responsibility. Indeed. And so, Schellenberger asks, do you really support the Trump administration defying a judge's orders? Let's play the game, baby. My response: if the judge is issuing orders outside of his jurisdiction, yes. If we allow a judge, especially a lower court judge, to overturn international agreements between world leaders, we have no credibility. How could a president possibly negotiate with any world leader if they thought a partisan lower court in the U.S. would stop any arrangement from happening? And it will, especially in this quote unquote administrative civil war. Every action Trump has taken has been challenged. Right now, we have a judge arguing that anyone, for any reason, can enlist in the military and serve, regardless of whether or not they have a mental disorder. Now, hold on. Gender dysphoria, mental disorder. Trump said, you can serve so long as you are functioning normally. A judge said no to this preliminary injunction. This means that people who are suffering schizophrenia, who are suffering from anorexia, bulimia, or pica must be affirmed in their choice of how they deal with their mental disorder in the DSM-5. I am not being mean. That's the academic term for it. You saw my argument this morning. Once again, an absurdity. I say, especially when you consider the AEA, the American Enemies Act, actions Trump took are at best pending adjudication. This was not a cut and dry, quote, you can't do this, that the judge tried to stop. This was a, quote, cancel your dealings with El Salvador until we figure this out. That's insane. Under the law, Trump is allowed to do what he is doing. So if you want to review the law, it is insane that you would say, we're going to stop you from doing what is legal right now, that is in transit, until we figure it out. I stress to you once again, how could a president possibly negotiate with any country if at any point a lower court judge simply says, we don't know the rules on this, cancel all of your dealings? The United States has a deal, I believe it was $6 million in total, for the Venezuelan gang members, the individuals being deported to El Salvador to be placed in prison. Trump negotiated this with El Salvador. The deal is made. The planes depart, and a judge says, cancel the deal. Trump is not allowed to negotiate and enact these deals unless he gets approval from the courts. Let's talk about a scenario where you think this makes sense. How would Donald Trump possibly engage in these negotiations of deportation? Would he first petition a judge and say, Your Honor, we would like to engage in negotiations with El Salvador? Well, that doesn't make sense. Trump doesn't answer to lower court judges. You want to argue that lower court judges can stop the president because it's a co-equal branch and they can say, put a pause on it. I'd argue within their jurisdiction. Military and foreign affairs is not part of that. Domestic affairs, yes. Now, after the actions are complete, here's my view. Trump does thing. You say, I don't know if you're allowed to do thing. I sue. The judge's review, is thing allowed to be done? And they say, okay, from this point on, we do not believe under the AEA that Trump can do what he did. Fine. But the idea that Trump is defying a judge right now by engaging in his constitutional authorities is insane, because it would mean that Donald Trump, as the president of the United States, before he could take any action at all in foreign relations, he would have to confer with judges first. He would have to sign a document saying, I hereby request permission from the judiciary before I can take any foreign policy action. Psychotic. Here are some responses. Kim Iverson says, thank God district judges are able to check a president's power. It came in handy against Biden's vaccine mandates. Indeed. Now, as to Salvadoran negotiations relating to codified law and a judge's attempt to undermine the president and international dealings. Imagine a scenario where a lower court evangelical judge ruled a president's withdrawal of support from Israel was void pending adjudication, and the military must resume shipment of arms. We'd never be able to negotiate peace treaties ever again. The chicken's head is cut off. Now, I know many, Kim Iverson and many others are very concerned about what Israel does. So let's play this game. Donald Trump has a plane en route to withdraw U.S. military weapons and personnel from Israel. And he says, we're done with this deal. Israel's not getting any support. They won't end the war in Gaza. Trump says to Netanyahu, to the parliament of Israel, you will end the bombing of Gaza or we will pull out all of our military support. It's a hypothetical, by the way. It's not really happening. Imagine that scenario. And the Democrats and evangelicals in the U.S. are apoplectic. How Trump can't do that. Israel's our ally. The president can't do that. Israel says we won't stop. I mean, the ceasefire broke. That actually did happen. So Trump says, okay, start boarding the planes. We're pulling out of Israel. We are cutting off our support. This war must be stopped. And then along comes a lower court judge who says, nope, turn the planes around, send the weapons back to Israel. What? That's insanity. That is insanity. Donald Trump can never enter into a negotiation again if a judge can undermine it the moment he does it. Now, I understand with deportations to El Salvador, we're not talking about ongoing military operations. I mean, like active conflict. Though the Trump administration argues this is dealing with terrorists. I am flabbergasted. This is the pinnacle of hypocrisy from these individuals. I do not take executive authority lightly. Barack Obama murdered a 16-year-old American citizen. That was outside of his authorities. They argued it was within it. You want to kill an American? You can't do it. Sorry. You make an argument for war, have Congress declare it, grant an authorization of use of military force, and then the president can dispatch to a nation we have just entered war with. Barack Obama, as the president, cannot bomb a country we are not at war with. That's totally different. Now, that being said, what was the ramifications? We know that you as president cannot murder Americans. So, yeah, if Donald Trump ordered the bombing of Americans in Yemen or of an American and a judge said stop, I'd say yes, because Trump doesn't have the authority to do that. Now, there are challenges in this law that we must navigate. Abdulrahman al-Awlaki, a 16-year-old, was not an enemy combatant. Some argue that Anwar al-Awlaki was. I still believe if an American is engaged in enemy actions against the United States, you need judicial review before the United States is allowed to execute that American. Period. Enemy combatants, when Congress declares war, the president can't. Trump, as president or whoever, then gets to control what the military does after the fact. Totally agreed. There are certain circumstances where it is reasonable to argue a president is acting outside of his authority. Engaging in war, initiating war, or starting war is outside his authority. Killing Americans is too. Donald Trump deporting individuals under the codified Alien Enemies Act, which says no judicial review, is within his purview. And Obama deported tons of people. So spare me the hypocrisy. We can't live in a country if this is the game we're going to play. Now, I'll admit, there are a lot of challenges in where we draw those lines. And there are people saying, I can't believe you would defend Trump just taking people and sending them to a Salvadoran prison at his word. No, I want him to publish a list of the people who were deported with some degree of transparency. But that is their due process. The due process for an American citizen is you get to go before a court and a judge and all this stuff. You don't, by virtue of walking into this country as a criminal, alien, or otherwise, get access to the entirety of our system. That would be insane. Now I'll say this. Throw your principles out the window, ladies and gentlemen. I ain't playing those games. We have gone through nearly a decade of administrative warfare. You are not going to come to me and say, oh, but Tim, won't you please sit here and be fair and reasonable to us, the people who have sought to destroy your nation and still seek to do so? I'm going to say this. You want to live in Candyland and the world of naivety? By all means, you go ahead and do it. But the reality of the world is this. In war, principles be damned. Now, I know it sucks, right? It does. But as the saying goes, all is fair in love and war. Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus. Don't come to me and tell me that Trump is doing something wrong when we are in an escalating civil strife period. They have tried to kill Donald Trump. I'm saying the two assassins did. That's the they. There have been powerful individuals trying to put him in prison, targeting his lawyers. Now you come to me and say Trump can't deport people. Actually, codified, he can. This is not even that controversial. And you're trying to stop him. Abraham Lincoln had a large portion of the Maryland legislature arrested and imprisoned. They created a corridor where there were no rights at all. Abraham Lincoln is cherished. You want to talk about what it means to be in war and conflict? Spare me your platitudes. We'll see how this plays out. Stay tuned. We got more segments coming up, and we'll see you all then. Follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast.